Our featured guest tonight is the Honorable Richard S. Gebelein, Attorney General for the state of Delaware, and was a graduate of Salesianum High School, University of Pittsburgh, and then he went to Villanova Law School. Now, following service as a Justice of the Peace and as a prosecutor in Pennsylvania, and also following service as a clerk for the Court of Chancery, he was appointed a Deputy Attorney General in 1971. In 1974, he was appointed State Solicitor in charge of the Civil Division for the Department of Justice. After that, he went on as a Deputy Public Defender, and then he also was in private practice. After that, he ran for State Attorney General and was elected in 1979, a position that he's held since that time. He's now running again for that position as a Republican, and we're very honored and pleased to have the Honorable Richard S. Gebelein. Hello, Rich. How are you?
Bob, pretty good. It's good to be here.
Rich, could you tell us basically what the Attorney General's office does?
Well, I think the easiest way to do that is to simply reverse the words and say General Attorney. He is the attorney for the state. That means he's responsible for all criminal prosecutions, but it also means he's responsible for representing the state in civil actions and giving advice to state officials like a lawyer would for an ordinary client.
Now, you mentioned before the show that you were very interested in victim service programs. What's being done now for victims of crime?
Well, we've come a long way in Delaware for victims of crime. It used to be that the victim was the forgotten person in the criminal justice system.
Yes.
And we've gone to the extent of establishing certain programs to help victims. We have a victims assistance program where people are contacted, consulted, and counseled as to what is available for them, what they can do to get relief, referring them to the Violent Crimes Compensation Board, for example, and even sometimes appearing with them before that board to help them get what they're entitled to. We have a rape response unit where we have a social worker that works with victims of that crime and assists them in getting psychological counseling or other help that's available in the community. So there are two of the programs. There are a few others too.
What about restitution? Is that one of your programs also?
That's a program that we believe in very strongly. We think that it works two ways. One, it helps the victim to get whole, which is part of the criminal justice system. But also it teaches the offender a lesson too, that his acts have consequences and that he has to pay a price. He has to get back and attempt to help the victim out.
Now, during your term, have there been any significant changes in the general scope and direction of the Attorney General's office?
There have been a number. I think one is that we have emphasized more strongly the victim. We have established these units and we have emphasized the role that we can play in assisting to get restitution and counseling the victims. But another one is the area of felony screening, where we have put more emphasis on looking at cases at an earlier time and trying to dispose of them as quickly as possible. When you have justice that's delayed for a long period of time, sometimes the era changes and people forget the victim. They forget what's happened in the past and they look at the defendant. It's better to get that person before the court quickly and get him sentenced quickly.
Let me ask you another question. You've made a lot of headlines with your crackdown on drug offenders. Do you consider that a very important part and function of your duties?
I think that's perhaps one of the most important areas in the law enforcement area today. Drug enforcement is something that, of course, receives a lot of national attention with all the drugs coming in through Florida and California and the border areas. We've seen some of that starting to come into Delaware because of crackdowns in those other areas. We've done a couple of things to fight that. We put together the first law in the United States on look-alike drugs to prevent the sale of drugs that look like real drugs but which are actually legal substances packaged together to give you a wallop. We put a very heavy drug trafficking law together, and that was enacted into law last year. It has the toughest penalties of any law in the nation. And that law was designed as a message to drug traffickers that if they're looking for a place to go to get it out of Florida, they shouldn't come to Delaware.
Now, what about pot smokers? Do you feel that's important to crack down on them also?
I think it is, and I don't think so much as cracking down on the smokers, but getting the dealers and the people that are pushing marijuana. One of the things that we run into when we try to deal with the drug scene is dealing in international relations, believe it or not. And when you go to a country like Colombia, where there's a lot of cocoa grown and cocaine is produced and smuggled into the United States, they will say to us, when we ask them to try to help with the cocaine problem, they'll say, well, you don't do anything about marijuana. And marijuana is more of a problem in Colombia than cocaine is, as far as they're concerned. They say, if you don't care about that drug, why should we care about this one that seems to be a problem in your country? So.
Well, it's been said that if marijuana just usage was decriminalized, that justice departments such as yours could put more emphasis into harder crimes and more crimes that have to do with violence. How would you address those people who say that?
Well, again, I think that the international argument is one very strong argument, and that is the fact that if you go to Southeast Asia, for example, and talk to those people, they consider hashish and marijuana more serious than heroin, which they grow in their areas. And if we say that's legal here, why shouldn't heroin or opium be legal in the United States? So that is one problem that you have to face. The other is that you provide a market, a big market for the international drug syndicates that produce this material, and the legalization, I think, would increase the market.
Now, you ran on a platform 4 years ago of saying that you didn't believe the Attorney General's office should be a political one, and for that reason you were only going to run for one term. Now, since that time, you've changed your position. Would you explain why you have?
There's been a number of reasons or factors that have entered into my decision to change my position on that. The first is that a lot of people have come to me and they've asked me to run. The Fraternal Order of Police last summer passed a resolution saying that they thought I was doing a good job and that I should run again so that people would have a choice of the best candidates. Another factor was that we have two candidates that are running that are from the Attorney General's office already. When I made that statement, I said that the office should be kept free of politics. Once you have one candidate in the office is not free of politics. So my not running would not, in effect, carry out the purpose of that comment. There are two people already, so we're in a position where it wouldn't affect the outcome.
You mentioned the two other persons. That would be Mr. Oberle and Mr. Burke. They're both running. Mr. Burke is running as a Republican, Mr. Oberle as a Democrat. Would you explain briefly how your philosophies differ from theirs?
Well, I think it's fairly difficult to do that because neither of them have been very complete in stating what their philosophy is on any particular issue. I know that Mr. Oberle announced 4 or 5 positions that he would take, and on most of them I believe that we're already doing those things. He talked about drug enforcement. Well, we've done an awful lot in the area of drug enforcement. He talks about in the area of plea bargaining that a senior prosecutor should have to approve a plea bargain. Well, already the felony screening unit, which includes several senior prosecutors, makes a decision as to what the lowest plea acceptable in a case is. So that's already being done. So I'd have to see more what they're going to say before I could react to that question.
Very briefly, there have been some who have said that Mr. Burke, who was recently fired by you, was done as a political decision because he decided to run against you. How would you address those critics who say that?
Well, that decision was made long before Mr. Burke indicated any interest in running for Attorney General, and it was communicated to him, so I don't think that was a factor at all.
Richard Gebelein, if I could ask you basically what you feel that you would do in the next 4 years, 30 seconds or less, what do you expect to do in your next term?
I think there's a couple areas that need expansion and effort. One is in the area of organized crime and organized criminal activity. I'd like to get a RICO statute in this state, which is a racketeering statute. I'd like to use that statute against the beginnings of organized crime that exist here. I'd like to do a little bit more in the drug area. I'd like to actually get some of the dealers and the distributors that have sort of maintained a presence in the state.
Well, thanks very much. You've taken time out of your busy schedule to be here, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been enjoyable.
This has been Richard S. Gebelein, the Attorney General for the state of Delaware, who's come on to tell us a little bit about the position of Attorney General, and we hope perhaps continued success in his future endeavors, whatever